All right. So welcome to explAInED. We have our guest, make sure I'm saying this right, Torrey Trust.
Yeah.
My wife's name is Torrey, spelled completely different. So if I got that messed up, it was going to be a bad thing for everybody. Welcome to explAInED. So just a little background. Sean, Renee, and I just are right now actively exploring AI and the world of AI in education. And we just ask a bunch of goofy questions of people that are much smarter than us. Well, not Renee, but smarter than Sean and I. So the first question for you is can you tell us a little bit about yourself, but also, this is the tough part, define what AI means to you.
Oh, goodness. All right. I'll start with a little bit about myself. That seems like a little bit easier to answer. I'm professor of learning technology at the University of Massachusetts Amherst, where I teach in our community education and social change major for undergraduates and prepare them to use technology in whatever future endeavors they go into in the field of education. And my research continues to evolve as technology evolves. So my main line of research is professional learning networks, how to support teacher learning beyond formal professional development. And that's really what got me into artificial intelligence. It was literally 3 months before I was set to give birth to my first kiddo. And I was like, I'm not going to be following everything that's on social media. I'm just going to take a break and try to make it through to childbirth. And then it was like ChatGPT came out and all of the different professional learning networks that I was in were just, there was the complete fear of, we don't need education anymore. I'm going to ban all technology in the classroom. And then there was the opposite, which was like, I love this. I'm going to dive right in and I'm not going to look at privacy policies or terms of service or any of that. And I was trying really hard to say, okay, just let it go. Just let it go. And then I'm like, I can't let this go. I'm going to have to jump into this conversation. And really, that's how my trajectory of my career has gone, is trying to identify some big areas that educators need help with and create open educational resources, materials to support educators in thinking critically and deeply about technology. What artificial intelligence means to me, it's not intelligent. I know that. I don't like the term intelligence, and I'm sure we could probably talk about this later. But it does, when used well, make my life easier. Not all the time. I don't use it all the time, but there's definitely, we've had artificial intelligence for many decades now. And, Google Maps is so much easier than printing out the step-by-step directions from MapQuest. And, even ATMs, or now you can just scan a photo of your check and not have to go to the ATM. Uber, Lyft, those kind of things are based off of AI, knowing where you are and figuring out the closest cars and all of those things. So, I think we've had those versions of AI for quite some time, and they do make things easier. Of course, create new problems as well. Generative AI, to me, is a whole new world of figuring out how to interact with AI that now can generate content and what that means. So that's my thoughts about how I would define AI.
I love the intelligence quote. That might go on a t-shirt later on.
That seems to be the common theme.
Yeah.
That as we're talking to people, is like, the name is not a good name.
Well, it worries me because I have college students, 18 to 21 years old, and they use AI a lot in my classes. And a lot of them have this misconception that because it's called artificial intelligence, it's as intelligent as a human. Like, they continue even at that age to have this misconception until I say, here's actually how these tools are designed and work. And that slowly starts to pull away that they're not even close to intelligent. But I think a lot of people just get, they see that term intelligent and just assume that these tools, we can trust them and they can do really incredible things.
Well, yeah, and they're very good at seeming to be intelligent.
Yes.
Like someone else I know.
Exactly.
I have a question for you that came up when you were talking about your research. So Sean, Renee, and I spend a lot of time working with professional learning and educators and their learning. And we've had varied experiences, in particular with technology, around whole group, large group training and the individual learning that needs to happen, and how to make those happen. When you think about AI and those things, is there anything in your research about how, you get teachers for 30 minutes in an in-service and you're supposed to train them on this magical thing and do this. But the reality is there has to be this kind of level of personal work and coaching that happens. What are some structures and things that you've seen that work really well in thinking about that?
I'm going to start with what I think doesn't work well with AI, because that might help frame it better. I think what worries me the most is how many startups and AI companies there are that want to get into education and often don't have people who work in education on their board of directors, even part of their design team. And more recently, I'd say in the last couple of months, I've seen a lot of AI through, basically a camera will record everything you're doing in the classroom, and then AI will analyze that. And then, after class, you can have a chat with AI about your teaching and what to improve. And we've seen this for years with other tools outside of AI, right? There's those are often used for like observation and pre-service teaching and whatnot. And there is some potential for, AI to analyze and provide immediate feedback. But I think it's best at providing immediate feedback on like writing and standard American English, not on classroom teaching, which is one of the most complex professions in the entire world. So I really worry about using AI for personalization in that sense. But when it comes to designing professional development, I think there are ways where you can do your 30-minute PD and then give teachers a series of prompts to explore on their own outside of PD that are what, Ethan Mollick and Lilac Mollick call mega prompts, right? So they're basically, you turn AI into a simulation. My favorite is the Choose Your Own Adventure. I love doing, I don't know if you read those Choose Your Own Adventure books when you were growing up, where you're like, it's nonlinear learning, right? You get to drive your learning. And so I've turned AI into a choose your own adventure quite often for my students, one around like budgeting for first years who have never thought about when you have to choose between buying textbooks or having groceries for next week. And so AI can engage them in this deeper thinking and decision-making before they actually get in that setting. And I think the same could be applied for teachers, is if you give them a series of case studies or simulations or interactive learning experiences with AI that builds on whatever you're doing in that 30 minutes to say, okay, here's what we covered this week. It was competency-based learning. Here's just a quick overview of it. Now here's an AI simulation, and it's all built around asking the teacher questions, right? Because that's where AI can be beneficial, is not giving you information right off the bat, but really saying, okay, tell me about your class, and you're giving information about the ways that you teach, teaching philosophy, how you've set up activities. Then AI can provide personalized questions, can provide feedback based on your responses. And I found that my students consider that to be pretty helpful when they're engaging in those kind of interactive simulations.
That's awesome. I like that quite a bit.
I think what you were saying is resonating with me, because it seems to me that as we're going along here throughout this year, the power for education with AI might be in creating those custom chatbots where you can control the narrative a little bit more. That's mostly what I've used it for. I work in a high school, and it's mostly what I've used it for this year with students, to have teachers be able to input the data they want the chatbot to be drawing from, instead of just, like ChatGPT. And So being able to control maybe the outputs a little bit more, but also having a tool that students can use to kind of lighten the load for teachers as well. But when you're doing your work, what you were just talking about, what tools typically do you use?
I let my students choose, and unfortunately, they're all over 18, so it's less of an issue with privacy policies in COPPA, Children's Online Privacy Protection Act. So I'll just put up a whole, you can use ChatGPT, Meta AI, because a lot of them have Instagram and are more familiar with that. Most end up using Gemini and ChatGPT. One used Snapchat AI for an assignment last week that I thought was hilarious and did not go well. So that was not ideal. But I give them that choice, and it often takes a lot of pressure off of me. If something doesn't go as planned, they might pick out another tool to try out or use. And I do that with all the tools that we do throughout the semester, not just AI. And then that way we can compare across different platforms. So like they come into class and, you use Gemini, you use ChatGPT. What kind of responses did you get? And, I do think I'm conflicted about the idea of having students interact with chatbots in K-12 schools as a way of personalizing learning. And I know there's tools out there. Someone just introduced me to, I don't know if it was school AI or something that like creates personalized spaces, and the teacher can kind of have more control and push stuff out to students. And one of them was like, you're pushing a chatbot out to students around, the Great Gatsby, and then students can interact with the chatbot. And I still, I think students can find ways to break down the safeguards of those tools or get AI to say things that it shouldn't say. I even had one of my 18-year-olds in my first year seminar get in a fight with AI because they were practicing how to engage in roommate conflicts and had AI act as their roommate, and got in a whole fight, and then AI left the conversation. Which was not expected. I was trying to help them learn how to think through the right words to use with your roommates. And this was in a college level course where we were doing it in a monitored way. Whereas, if you just say, okay, I only have time for working in small groups with these 3 students, the rest of you all go work with chatbots. That scares me because we don't know what these tools are going to produce. And even tools like Conmigo, which is used by I think 100,000 or 200,000 students, has been found to be wrong quite often. And so, there's still a lot of issues with how these tools are designed and used. I would really limit them to when they can be beneficial and when you can build AI literacy. So using AI for students to personalize their learning about Great Gatsby, no, probably wouldn't have them have a chat with Great Gatsby or about that book in a personalized way. I would probably use it as a teacher if there was I knew a lot of students in the class loved football. I'd probably go to say, AI, how do I teach the Great Gatsby through football strategy? And then I would bring some of those strategies into my class to be more engaging. And then I would probably, use AI in more of a critical term of okay, rewrite this chapter of the Great Gatsby. And then students can analyze the AI version, in the style of a Taylor Swift song or whatever. And they could analyze that versus the original, have conversation about how these tools work. I think that's really where we need to get students at, is thinking critically about when and where they should use these tools and when not to, because right now a lot of their uses are really problematic.
Yeah, I've been thinking about when, because I've been hesitant to use chatbots with students, especially I've seen some where they make it sound like you can go ahead and use it in second grade or something, and those kids just can't understand what they'd be interacting with. And from what you said at the beginning of this conversation, it's even an issue for college students misunderstanding kind of the intelligence of what they're using or lack of. So I guess what I'm wondering is, what would you say to somebody who did want to use, say, in an 11th grade, older high school, like, and they do want to use chatbots, is there like what activities are good for that, if any, or would you totally try to help them reframe their thinking?
And yeah, that's a great question. I'm actually coming out with a book this fall on using AI for civic engagement at the middle and high school level. So I'm not saying don't use these tools, but I'm saying often the uses that I see are ineffective or problematic. And so for one of the most common uses, looking at tens of thousands of students, a couple different surveys, is finding information, right? Rather than going to an internet search, they're going to AI to look information up. And if you look at the environmental costs of AI, that's like looking to ChatGPT to answer a simple definition versus a Google search is going to be 10 times, more energy needed just for that, which is significantly more energy than just going to a dictionary in your computer. So, and that continues to be within the top 3 reasons that students use AI is to look information up. The Claude actually just came out with a whole report for education looking at, I think, like 20 or 30,000 data points from anyone with a .edu address. So they're assuming it was college students and no faculty are using Claude, but that's all in the data set. And it was interesting. Computer science was the most common use, and business and humanities were like way less common than the standard in the field. And when it showed you specifically within each subject area how it was being used, computer science and math were like to do their work for them, right? To solve problems, to walk step by step through problems, to debug code, to write code. And then business and humanities was a bit of, to help with writing, but also teach me how to do something. And that's all to say, like, a lot of these uses are students, turning to find information or to do their work for them. Again, it's still not, these tools have not increased cheating, but it's made it easier to do. Whereas I do think these tools have a lot of potential, and one of them is creative thinking. So think about how these tools are designed. They're pulling from billions of parameters from the internet, which is way more than any single person can hold in their head, way more information. So if you're trying to do something creative, it's pulling from a much bigger database than a single brain can hold. So I do think these tools can help, not replace, help creative thinking. And this can be especially important when students get stuck on creative thinking part of a creative assignment. So for example, like I had my students design global collaboration projects last week. And there was one group, we had an hour and a half, that after an hour still did not have an idea for their project. And we only had the hour and a half in class to actually build the whole website and do the whole project. And they still, they were stuck on I can't come up with ideas. And that wasn't the purpose of the assignment. It was to build out the whole project. In that case, I was like, get over to AI right now, have it write out a list, remix one of those ideas. That's fine. You're just practicing that. So I think it's helpful in that aspect where it is more of an assistant or aid in creative thinking. But in classes where I do teach creative thinking, AI is not allowed during those classes because, again, students will just use it to do the creative thinking for them. So effective uses, I would say, helping students with metacognitive strategies, like thinking about their thinking, what I talked about earlier, simulations and interactive learning exercises where they are driving their learning, like making choices, making decisions, and having to defend their decisions. Those types of interactions are much more powerful and helpful uses because you're going to get more personalized feedback from AI than just going to look up information or have it write something for you that you're going to remix or something like that.
We've talked to a couple of different folks at the college level, and I have a daughter in college as well, and we've heard a varied response about student interest, support, and opinion about AI, particularly students that are in the creative arts versus those in business versus those in literature or humanities. What are you seeing in general about the student population's response to AI at UMass?
Well, it's interesting because I teach, College of Education students, and I teach the classes called like Teaching and Learning with Technology, Digital Tools and Apps for 21st Century Learners. I do a pre-course survey every year, and nearly like 90% of my students say they are like deathly afraid of technology, with no plans to ever use technology because they're going into elementary teaching and they will not need to use technology every year. This continues to happen every year. They just have this concept of, I don't, and it changes by the end of the semester, which like, yay, my class is a success. And I'm not saying we have to force technology on elementary students, but like there are times that it can be helpful. So that's all to say, right around like maybe a year after ChatGPT came out, I would, ask my students each semester who has heard of this tool, whereas like 90 to 100% of computer science students had, it'd be like one or two of my education students. So there was like very disciplined, like specific differences. But nowadays, like really, it's starting this past fall, 2024, it was nearly my whole class. But again, it was, they had heard of it, they had possibly used it, but the ways they use it in my class, just they had no idea what AI is really capable of. They were just using it to most commonly upload their notes and PowerPoints from their instructor to get a study guide, to answer questions for them, or to assist with writing, and not in the ways that we've used it in class for simulations, for immediate feedback, for a lot of different reasons. And we also talk about the behind the scenes, like, did you know these are just basically guessing machines that get stuff wrong quite often and are very biased, and they start to think more deeply about these tools. So I can only speak from like my students' perspective in education, but they have, I think, been the slowest to adopt technology. And, I've also seen just a lot of students with a lot of fear because educators are not clear or transparent in their syllabi, in their courses about what is and what is not allowed. And there has been a lot of fear around getting caught. I remember these fears when Turnitin came out, its original version when I was in college. I'm going to date myself here. And there was a lot of like, I was so scared after every essay that I submitted through Turnitin because I didn't understand how it worked. And some of my roommates were getting like flagged and called into the dean's office. One got like kicked out of a class, and it was like this whole like thing of, oh, professors are out there to get you, or, teachers are trying to catch you using these tools. And so there also is like a fair share of students who just don't want to use these tools and out of pure fear. And I think they also need to overcome those issues, but that needs to be from the educators need to help guide them more in that.
That's fascinating for all three of us who work with incoming new teachers and just experience that hesitancy about all of that. And what's interesting is a lot of our districts and our leaders are now saying to the three of us, like, we have to figure out a way to move teachers along in this work. And of course, nobody has the answer on what that should look like and what it shouldn't look like. But the first thing we run into is people that don't want to do it. And so that's really reaffirming for us. Thank you very much for that. It's not just the three of us experiencing that.
Oh, that has been since the start. I have seen a fear around these tools and a resistance to using these tools. And there was a quote, and I cannot remember the person's name. It's in one of my presentation slides, that basically we can no longer engage in resisting these tools because then we lose our voice in the conversation around AI in education. And I know there was a group of English teachers who sent a whole like 10 bullet point list of in resistance to AI tools that was circulated around the internet. And anyone who, was resisting technology or feared technology used that as their main, like, this is what I believe, and it goes into the environmental impact and societal, so agreed. But then when you do resist these tools, it's problematic for your own part as an educator, but also for your students who, if they don't have opportunities to learn them in class, they're going into careers where nearly every career is going to be using AI in some way, whether they want to or not. So then you're going to exacerbate the digital divide between those who have access to and can use these tools outside of school versus those who, when they come to school, are relying on those opportunities, but their teacher fears using these tools or resists using these tools, and they're not going to be as well prepared for the future.
Do you think, so thinking about like working with high school students, part of the focus on not just AI, but just technology in general is preparing them for future workforce. So I struggle with reconciling, how do I reconcile this resistance from some, or this fear, or I don't see the value in it, versus I also need to prepare my students for future workforce. And it almost feels like my experience is, well, that's someone else's job. I teach math, like that's not my job to do that. Or I teach English. That should be a class. So in working with pre-service teachers, like how do you get that idea across of technology like integrated into everything and that kind of idea? Because I think we've struggled as tech integrators, and Mike is the director of technology. I feel like technology integration was never rolled out properly. It went from like, we have a computer lab, this is your computer class, to, hey, we're going to push this into the classroom, but it was never, properly integrated into the curriculum.
Yeah, and that's been a problem I've been researching for more than a decade, and the National Education Technology Plan has written about for multiple decades. I think for one thing, this is not just preparing students for their future career, because some people have resistance to even just mentioning that education's sole purpose is preparing them for their future career. It's also about preparing them to be citizens, preparing them to be community members, to interact with others. And we are at the point where AI is pushed at us in every possible direction, so that these high school students, when they use Snapchat, AI is built in. When they use Instagram, Meta has AI built in. Google now has AI summaries, which, fun fact, some of my colleagues said their undergraduates cited as an original source. So yikes on that one. I haven't seen that yet, and I will cry the day that I do. But like Canva has AI, Magic Studio, Padlet just added a whole suite of AI. It's just like every company wants AI. And even if students somehow go into a career that doesn't interact with AI, they're using it in their personal lives to write emails, to write love letters, I found from a study of some of my college students, to figure out how to communicate with their roommates, like how to write a text message, to, plan their recipes for the week, to do a whole bunch of things that are not career related. So basically, like, it's becoming deeply embedded in our lives. So how I often start presentations is I will first walk through the evolution of these technologies. ChatGPT was this basic like text-based prompting tool, and now has like Canvas where you can just write and edit text directly in it. I don't know if you've seen Operator, where you can hand over control of your computer to AI, but there is someone on LinkedIn who has gone through and shown how they've done that to complete a whole online course without ever interacting with the online course, right? Anyway, so I usually show teachers, like, here are all the like recent evolutions of these tools, and usually end up with that Google commercial, Google Gemini, where people are just, have Gemini in their hand and like, how do I cook? How do I change a car tire? How do I talk to someone? Which I hope we never get to that point, but that's where AI companies want us to go. And then from there, I show there's a whole bunch of headlines of news articles of real estate agents can't imagine their lives without ChatGPT. That was 2 months after ChatGPT came out. That was the headline. Meteorologists have changed from like forecasters to communicators. Business is incorporating ChatGPT. And so I show a lot of different careers and how these tools are already changing the way people work. And so between showing teachers the evolution of these tools and what students have in the palm of their hands today and their future, that usually gets people on board with, okay, I will at least have a conversation about this. And even still, like, our job as technology supporters for educators is never to like push these tools at people. The best thing that I can do when I start a presentation is say, I don't have any answers for you. I'm going to give you information to help you make an informed decision. And if they ultimately decide to ban AI, then I know that they have at least understood that doing so will come at significant costs, but they've made that decision. And there are people who still make that decision. And I just gave a presentation to psychological and brain services faculty, some teaching classes of 450. There are ways you can redesign your teaching to like reduce motivation to use these tools to cheat, but not when you're teaching 450 students in a single class. So if you need to ban for that reason, you need to tell students why you're banning these tools. You can't just do an outright ban because they won't trust you. And do so from an informed perspective. And so that's kind of the approach I take when I work with educators.
Very validating. Thank you very, very much for that. We're just about
it's like a therapy. It's a therapy session today. Yeah. Thank you, Torrey.
I think we're all in the same boat. You were doing the same thing that I'm doing, and we're just trying to help educators along in thinking through these really challenging things. And unfortunately, it's just like technology is thrown at education, often without any influence from education. And we're just trying to catch up one thing after another. So that's really the perspective that I have taken at this point is I will give you the resources and information and you do with it what you need to do to teach and go from there.
Thank you. Thank you very much. In closing, I have one quick question for you. Are you near the Wachusett Mountains?
I just drove by there yesterday on the way out to Concord, Massachusetts. So it was about 45 minutes, I'd say, from here.
So are you following the recent Bigfoot sightings that have occurred there at all? Just out of curiosity.
I'm sad I missed that because I think I would have stopped on the way to Concord yesterday.
Okay. Well, I'll send you some information. You can choose to look at it or not, but I'll get that to you today.
All right. That was that seems like a place for Bigfoot to hang out.
Certainly. It's curious, So. Thank you.
An AI-generated headline. I'm just checking.
No, it's not. From very different sources. I only follow the reliable sources.